this is the first time you are tuning in to this channel, or whether you're seeing this on Facebook, on this channel I talk everything about living and moving to San Diego. And while I love making these videos, I also love helping you make those decisions when relocating to the city, or just if you're already living here and you're seeing this on Facebook. It's what I do every day, along with obviously the partner I have here right now, Eric. If you want to introduce yourself, let everyone know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, what's going on, guys? So, my name's Eric Johnson. I am a retired Navy veteran and VA loan specialist here in San Diego. And Cameron and I are both super excited to go over a few really important topics that are pretty hot, and just kind of excited to share some knowledge and pass some things on to you guys.
Right on. So the way I imagine this going for this week today is I got a couple news articles that are probably more clickbaity, but I feel like it's news that everyone's seeing. So we're going to jump into it. We're going to talk about them, whether they're true, false, some of the facts behind it, and just our overall thoughts on it. So let me bring this up right here. So let's see. All right. So first one is going to be fear of housing bubble mount, but any correction won't be like the last one.
Okay.
So what do you think? Think it's
Well,
going to be like the last one? Is everything going to come crashing down around us?
no. I think there's just too many safeguards in play, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things that aren't talked about from a consumer aspect, right? But from a business aspect, we are trained and have a little bit more knowledge than the average consumer that I think isn't shared enough. So it gives us um, a sense of relief in knowing that there's all of these things that are put in place. And one of them is huge. It's called the Dodd-Frank Act, and it was in 2011, and it really put a lot of regulations on lenders, right? So we don't have a ton of subprime lending going on. Mortgage insurance has huge funds and reserves. The VA fund and the VA reserve for VA loans specifically is
Mm-hmm.
really grown and amassed to be a huge amount. So there's too many things in place. We don't have all of these people that are out buying these, seven, eight, $900 million homes that are just off stated income or bank statement loans, right? So, and I have a chart that maybe on another live I'll pull up
For
and
sure.
share with you, but basically it's the level of risk that's associated with today's lending is like 78% less than it was pre 2008,
Yeah.
right? Meaning the people that are actually borrowing money now are far more qualified to make those payments than they were back then. And then you combine that with all the safeguards of all the new, fair lending laws and all the new practices that go in place, the qualification standards, right? Everything is not as it was before. So when we start to approach these markets where it kind of looks the same, it kind of feels the same, right? But it's not the same. So this is not one of those scenarios where looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, it must be a duck type deal, right? Like it's very different because the circumstances that are going on behind the scenes have
Yeah.
changed so dramatically that the chance of ever going back to what we had before, I would say, is slim to none. Now, do I think there will be a correction, which is maybe a good segue back to you? I'd love to get your opinion on it. Yeah, I think there's going to be some sort of
Oh
of
yeah.
a correction, but I don't think it's going to be a crash or even a big slowdown. So, what are your thoughts on it?
No, I agree with you in that. I think, I mean, you hear it every day too. We have a lot of clients who they'll talk and they'll be like, "Oh, well, I'm going to wait for everything to come crashing down like '07, '08, and everything." Well, the first thing is, one, even if things do crash, it's like a favorite saying I love to say. You're a crash and 7 years away from rock bottom. Doesn't mean it always takes 7 years for everything to hit
Right.
rock bottom, but it just doesn't happen overnight. Um, I do think like eventually you will see things to come down, become more normalized, and eventually, as we get more inventory, like you will see the market flip to be more powerful on the buyer side.
Mm-hmm.
But no, you're right. I mean, buyers are extremely qualified, and a lot of those that were facing foreclosure from the last couple of years still have so much equity that in reality they can easily sell their home without being at
Exactly.
risk. I mean, even clients I got into, even in someone who was selling the house themselves a couple months ago, like they have, you have like tax liens on the property and things like that. And they probably in any other market would be in a very tough position to offload that property with how much work it needed and stuff like that. But
Right.
because of the current market situation, they were able to do it and still make a little bit of profit. So I think everyone's waiting for something that you will see. I think a correction eventually. No one knows when, but
Well,
it's going to take time.
and here's kind of my opinion on this, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting when we talk about a correction, and sometimes it almost has like a bit of a negative connotation to it, right? And when I say correction, I mean, what was our average appreciation in San Diego last year? Between 18 and 23%,
Yep.
depending on kind of where you were
The
in San
exact area in the
Diego.
county. Yeah.
Right. So when I say correction, the reality is even if you're making 500 grand a year, right? In 5 years, if a $750,000 home continued to appreciate at 22%, even an income earner at that level would almost be priced out of a home at 750, right? Like
Yep.
you're talking a $750,000 home is going to be up in the 1.2 range in such a short amount of time. So when I say correction, I mean, I think we're going to see right now, we saw appreciation climb at a pretty dramatic level. I think we're going to start to see it taper off. Do I think that we're going to see housing prices drop? No, I don't. That's not my personal opinion. I don't think the market and the data supports that. If I go back and look at just everything that's happened over the last 50 years, for example, average age of a first time homebuyer is 33 years old.
Yep.
And I don't think this gets taken into consideration a lot, but that generation of people, right? That's our generation, right?
Yep.
We we had almost as many people in our generation as the baby boomer generations were just shy.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all of these people that are out looking to buy homes, and we all know the inventory problem, right? We have
Yeah.
a huge, huge inventory problem. If I look at that inventory problem and I combine it with other issues that also don't get taken into account much, such as the fact that building materials have skyrocketed, right? So we have the prices of lumber up, the prices of steel are up, the prices of copper are up, even PEX, right?
Yep.
That plastic plumbing that goes in homes. If we just take those things into consideration, we can't produce enough homes to meet our current market's demand, right?
Exactly.
And when I say that, I start to go down this path of if we can't even produce enough home to go up with our current market's demand, that's why you see places like San Diego. How easy is it to build or add an ADU to a property right now? Super easy.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because they know realistically that us as consumers, as homeowners, the people that do have places and do have the property, if we can expand onto our property, that will help with our inventory issue.
Yep.
And then another interesting thing I think, Cameron, and you might have talked about this once before, is how many people of a younger generation do you see going into trades? I really like this topic, and this might be a
Yeah.
topic for a whole nother conversation, but
Probably.
very few young people are going into trades that would produce more homes. Also, another factor I think is not considered. So, to kind of get back on track with all of those things, I don't think we're going to see a huge correction. I think we'll see a slow and a.
Yeah. No, I agree. All those factors play a toll in it. And I think that's where I definitely think that's what we're looking at. But all right, next topic. All right. All right. This is a fun one because everyone gets very torn on this topic depending on what side of the house they fall on. And that's house flippers could be taxed under the new proposed California bill.
Ooh.
Now, this is a fun one. Have you looked much into it?
I haven't gone into it in a lot of detail. And I haven't gone into it in a lot of detail. And, I personally go back and forth on this. What are your opinions here?
Yeah, so I feel I get where they're coming from. I get that everyone loves to think that investors are coming in and destroying the market. And in some cases, they may be right. Maybe in certain markets, especially other areas. I will tell you, also being licensed in Florida, that I think there's a lot more investors flooding there than there are here. To be fair, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of the investors here are more commercial if they're not flipping homes.
Right.
But a lot of people see house flippers and like, oh, they're taking homes that would go to homeowners. But what people need to realize is flippers are look normally. I'm going to say 90% are going to look for homes that you probably couldn't get a mortgage on to begin with.
Right.
Prime example, like I've even seen a condo in Bonsall. House was full of black mold and needed a full gutting. No like bank is going to let someone move into that home without all that being fixed. So it's just not an option, right? But a flipper who has the cash can come in and sure, like they're going to end up reselling it at market rate. But they're going to come in,
Right.
they're going to clean up that home, and now you have a brand new home for a family to come in and move into. So, and also in the bill, when I did read it, and I encourage everyone to go look it up, read it yourself, but they aren't just attacking the equity. So, like, the general gist of it is they're taxing, if you sell a home within, I think it was like 5 years. Don't quote me on that. It kind of escaped me right now. But within 5 years, they're going to a massive tax on the equity to the state.
Hmm.
But it's also attacking the way they word it makes it sound like anyone who sells a home within that period, their
Well,
equity would get attacked.
what's interesting about this, and you brought up some good points. And the first point I'll want to kind of touch on here is let's look at the type of person, the type of buyer that would be interested in buying something like a condo, right? Let's use that condo that you said in your example here is full of black mold. That's a huge deal, right?
Yep.
So if you guys don't know, black mold spores can get into your lungs. It's a huge thing. You don't want to live and be around it. It's when they take all that out, the whole area gets sealed off. It's a huge process. It's a big ordeal, right? So you're right. That would be a potential issue with financing. But even if I were to just throw that out completely, the type of buyer that is looking for something like a condo, generally a first-time home buyer, right? They're trying to get their feet in the door. They understand the importance of buying a home. They get the equity appreciation. They understand those facts. Now, they're generally not going to have the capital to go in there and do that. Almost eliminates the type of people that would be buying that condo. So in that situation, for an investor to come in and make that a new viable source for somebody to come in and buy a first time home buyer, did it increase the price a little bit? For sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
But was it a very needed home for somebody to occupy, a potential first time home buyer? Absolutely. We know that there's a huge shortage. So I think that in that situation, they're doing us a favor. But if it truly is going to go to 5 years, and I haven't gone super deep on this bill yet, if it is 5 years, what does that do to people that are, let's say a young military family here in San Diego, right? Let's take an E4 and pick an E branch. They're in San Diego. They move into a condo, right? Married, get ready to have their first kid, and then they decide, hey, we need to get a bigger home. Now they should pay a huge amount because they haven't occupied their, 1 or 2 bedroom condo for 5 years. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. So the rule currently, right, is if you occupy a home as your primary residence for 2 years, you're exempt from any capital gains tax. That's our current rule.
Yeah.
I think 2 years is a fair rule.
I think it is. I think it's fair.
I think that's fair to go and increase that if that's what the bill presents, and I'll have to read it more into it and see. I think that's pretty unrealistic. Yeah. And I think that why would we increase the tax on these people that are going to flip homes when they're already paying a very high tax rate, capital gains tax rate, for owning the property less than 2 years? It's like we need to have viable market sources for different career fields, right? And I think what's not getting looked at here is how many people do they employ, because they do these flips fast, right? Yep. Plumbers, electricians, framers, carpenters, tile guys, hardscape, landscape. I mean, they employ a plethora of people to get these things done. What would it do to our local economy if we took those flips? Now, I'm sure you do as well. Several people where their primary source of income is from these investors that are flipping homes.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that it makes a lot of sense to impose something like that on somebody. I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
No, I agree. I understand where they're coming from. I think my biggest attack with it is how the bill's worded. I think
Right.
it's what they do best, unfortunately, in this state, and that's make very big reading where most people will not read it and they don't understand the full context of what the bill is
Right.
trying to do. And really, what it is like, sure, it'll increase tax revenue because it's not just flippers that are going to get hit.
Yeah,
Because
and
unfortunately,
I
you
think
can't
maybe
because you can't choose who a flipper is a lot of times.
right.
And so they have to make it vague in order to hit them. But in
Yeah.
turn, making it vague will eventually hurt someone down the line. And like you said,
Right.
military families. That's
Right,
one
right.
way.
And I think that's a good segment for, I mean, I think each one of these, we're kind of touching on each one of these topics lightly on this live. I think
Yeah.
any one of these, we could go in a lot more detail
Oh,
on
for
on a,
sure.
maybe the next live we do, maybe
Yep.
next week or something. Um, because there's so much good information we could put out on all of those. And we can look at both sides, right? Like, I don't ever want to just be closed minded and look at, hey, from the side of a flipper and from the side of a consumer, because sometimes I'll say, like you said, somebody who's flipping a home gets that house that's extremely distressed for very, very, very cheap.
Yep.
And then, we're talking, 300+ thousand dollars in profit, made in less than, a 6 month time frame. Right. So I think that on a lot of different fields that plays a huge factor, especially in appraisals, right? Like,
Yep.
what did that sale do to other sales in that area? And then over 6 months, when that home goes back on the market, I think that also makes the job of appraisers a bit more difficult too. And of
For
course,
sure.
they call those things out in the appraisal, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, I definitely think that there's a factor that gets considered in all of that.
No, I completely agree. Um, I think in San Diego, people definitely weigh like how, and this is the last thing I'll touch on this topic before going to the next one, is I think it's like you don't know what you don't know. And I think being active in another market as well with my partners, or being aware of other places I've lived in the military, talking to other colleagues in the industry, is I think people don't realize like it's way worse in like other markets like the Midwest and the
Right.
South, because it's not just big, investors moving in. You also have a lot of mom and pop investors from California who sell and then they, I'm sure we've had clients before where I've dealt with where they sell here and then they move their money out of state. And they're also buying
Right.
up homes in other areas. So San Diego, I think like a biggest thing is maybe Airbnb, but they're trying to crack down on that with legislation, in the county, trying to
Oh,
prevent
right,
it.
and that's a whole top. That's a whole live
Oh
topic.
yeah, we're
Right?
not opening. We're
I
not
have a
opening
lot
that
of
can of
opinions.
worms.
I have a
But
lot of opinions about
yeah,
Airbnb.
but
So,
so yeah, personally, like
but
San
no,
Diego's not as bad of a market as I've seen in like other ones.
right, and to get on topic there, I mean, how many? I mean, I have 3 or 4 clients right now that are going to sell their homes, and you're right, they're going to take their money out of the state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think anybody in San Diego that has a significant amount of appreciation in their home, it's hard to not at least have a little bit of that thought process. Hey, like,
Oh yeah,
well, I'm sitting on $750,000 here, and maybe I just sell this place and I move to Texas or to Florida and I buy a bigger, newer home, a new construction build that's brand new,
yeah,
and then you know I have this extra cash and this residual money in my bank account that I would have never had before. So I
yeah,
think that thought is crossing a lot of people's mind. And who knows, maybe that's a good thing, right? Maybe
maybe.
this spread of people away from bigger cities will help with the overpopulation that we've seen in the last decade. I don't know, but
I
maybe
think the
that
next
is a
5 years will be very interesting as things
I
play out.
agree.
But I
I,
also feel that, and one of my buddies who also runs a finance channel as well that I've interviewed before, he made up a good point. It's like you might end up seeing a lot of these people that are relocating, that big COVID relocation, they might end up moving back to the cities that they left. And I've seen it before. People move out of state to like to Florida, Texas, and they get there and they're like, this is not California. I don't like it. And then they come back. So, and maybe not in large droves, but.
Right. And then this is a great question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've heard this. And we have a really good buddy who moved, and before he did, what do you think is a piece of advice that you would give somebody when they're selling a house that they got here in California and they're moving out of state? What's the fear if you want to come back?
The fear to coming back?
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's a tough one to ask because I look at it. I'm a very analytical person, so to me, it's just like cost to get back here. I will tell you, and moving costs, because I've quoted it. It's cheaper to move here than it is to move away. So you got that coming for you. But just plan it out. Make sure you can afford it. I mean, a lot of people, they leave because they have low incomes, and then all of a sudden their income increases. So maybe coming back, now they can afford a home. And especially, we'll go into our next topic here in a second article to look at. But as things do cool off eventually, you might actually be able to get into a home that you couldn't have when you left. So maybe it could be a better solution for you to come back just because you enjoy San Diego.
And I've heard that in some cases, right? But I always tell everybody that are moving away, if you can afford to keep the home that you already have and move away, right? Pay the property management company. You mentioned that earlier.
Yep.
But what I worry about for people when they sell their house, they take their equity, they move away, and then they have families that are left here and they're on the possibility of maybe wanting to come back. What if you can't afford to get back into the market, right? Yeah. Because if you left 2 years ago and you're getting homesick and you want to come back, well, what did your same house that you bought 3 years ago, you've been gone for 2 years now, right? So over a 5-year period, how much did that house appreciate? Do you think you could come back and afford to buy that same home? Right? That's always what I tell people. And it's not that it's a bad thing, and I don't want to like instill fear in people by any means. I just think that you need to be very analytical. You need to be very calculated when you make these decisions. And honestly, that's why it's important to have somebody who's a professional in the industry who's going to take this deep dive with you on these topics, because it's important. Like, you need to make sure you're analyzing all these things. Just like you said, even moving costs. I would say it's 50% cheaper to move into California than it is to move out. Just do the price of a U-Haul. And a lot of people don't know this. If you want to take a rental car or a U-Haul out of state and drop it off out of state somewhere, sometimes they won't even let you, right? It's like they want it to be dropped off to the same spot that it was. So it's interesting when you start factoring all of the different costs that are associated with it in. And then if you did want to come back, would you have the ability to do so?
Agreed. And I also tell people the market you're moving into, make sure you plan smart and you work with someone over in the market you're moving into who knows what they're doing, because you could find yourself in a situation where a lot of these markets are emerging, whether you want to live there or not. So the home you buy over there could actually still become a viable option to maybe boost your income if you choose to rent it out in the future. So it's plan smart, Right. And if you move there and you're like, wow, I love this area, I love living here, just not the specific neighborhood. Well, then great. You just made a smart financial decision where you bought. It was in the path of progress. And because a lot of these cities aren't like San Diego, where they're not built out like this county is in a lot of places. So they have room. You can easily buy a home. I say easily, but you can still buy a home in a path of progress to where, I have people that have built homes in like Orlando, right? And they built homes over there, and like their home value even before construction was done went up $50,000.
Right. And I know people, I think one thing people need to consider too, especially like, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are going to be in California.
Or moving to.
Yeah, or moving to, right? But when we say 50,000, sometimes that number seems small, right? Or inadequate, because you're like, oh, it went up 50,000, where in California we'll see these huge jumps in equity. But you got to remember, percentage-wise, if we put it into perspective, the price of that home and the percentage of equity gained, that would be very comparable to the price of a California home and the percentage of equity gained. So I think that everybody always needs to take that into consideration, because when people are talking homes, they're like, "Oh, it went up 50,000." They're like, "Oh, well, that wasn't that much." We're like, "Yeah, but I only bought the home for 250." So
Yeah.
it's a
Right.
completely different ballgame when we think of that. So I think pretty much nationwide we've seen,
Hmm.
these huge increases, and to your point, the path of progress is a huge resource, and I think should definitely be analyzed if you are looking, right.
Hmm.
And right, like you've seen our house in Fallbrook, right?
Yeah.
Like you've seen it. So
Yep.
it's like that's one of the reasons that I liked it out there, is because I feel like there's a path of progress there. As
Hmm.
the coastal communities fill up, where can we go? We can only
Yeah.
go east. There's nowhere
Yeah.
left. So path of progress is huge, and I love that topic. And I could ramble on about that for hours. So
Well, for sure. But that'll take us into the next topic I have, which are mortgage rates are increasing. Will that slow the housing market? And I'll let you touch on this one because that is your specialty in terms of rates
yeah,
increasing, and then I
so
go into what we're seeing in the market.
right, so yeah, rates. This has just been a fire topic since November, right? So since
Yeah.
the beginning of the year, we've seen like a 600 basis point swing. Huge changes in the interest rate market, right? Is it pricing some people out of the market? Yeah, absolutely,
Hmm.
it is. Um, but I think the reality is most of the buyers are still willing and able to buy, right? A lot of it is coming down to education, right? If I look at the market and the statistical data that's happened over the last 40 to 50 years, everything tells me that yes, rates are going to increase a bit more, right?
Yeah.
And as rates increase, we've seen this huge influx in inflation, right? And while we were seeing this huge influx in inflation, the Fed was buying a abundance of mortgage-backed securities, like 60 to $100 billion a month in mortgage-backed securities. So we were artificially keeping rates extremely low. Now, what happened is in November, the Fed announced, "Hey, we're going to taper off the buying of mortgage-backed securities." When that happened, it's almost like all of that inflation that had gone on when the Fed stopped buying those mortgage-backed securities caught up to us all at once.
Yeah.
Then we saw this dramatic spike in interest rates. So as the federal government increases the Fed funds rate, right, and we see inflation come down, interest rates will also come down. I have a great graph that shows really good representation over this over the last like 40, 50 years. And
Hmm.
it shows as inflation has spiked, the federal government increases the Fed funds rate, inflation
Yep.
comes down, and interest rates fall. So honestly, the advice I'm giving clients is with our inventory shortage right now, even though we know that appreciation has to taper off, we can't see a year over year 20+% increase in appreciation. So we know that we're going to see a bit of a taper.
Hmm.
But if I look at what can we increase rental rates in San Diego at, I think it's 5% per year,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So at 5% per year, I mean, as a landlord, you're going to increase year over year. Like it's only the correct business model to follow if you have a
Right.
rental property. So you know that you're going to have an increase in rent. You know that there's zero chance that you'll ever get any return on that investment of rent. And buying a home, we know will guarantee you appreciation. So as long as you can afford the mortgage payment with this higher interest rate, essentially the goal is to wait out the market until it comes down. When it does come down, you refinance, your payment will come down, and you will have gained all the appreciation over time with the home. And now you own it, you're building equity, um, you're not losing all of that money on rental income. Did you have to take a higher rate? Was there a bit more cost associated with it? Yeah, absolutely there was. That's an undeniable fact. But the
Yep.
reality is we have to just analyze everything and know that rates are going to come down, and when that time does happen, we reach out to all of our clients and we say, "Hey, rates have come down just like we thought they would. Cameron, it's time to refi. Let's knock this thing out. Here's what we can get your payment down to. Are you okay with that? Do I have the thumbs up? If the answer is yes, we knock it out, and you're happy. You got a house, and all is good in the world. So, um, you know, I hope that kind of answers the interest rate question and gives. I wanted to give some of the why behind it. Why are rates going up? And what are they possibly going to do? So I hope that's helpful.
No, I think it was a good example of what people need to expect when it comes to it. You know, like you said, it's temporary. Like, you can always refinance down. It's just,
Right.
plus it's kind of what needs to happen. I mean, they were so
It
low for a
is.
long time, and whether, it's the transition between, the transitionary period, I tell people, is like, oh, it's always the most painful until you get to the
Yeah.
other side. So,
Yeah.
if it's nothing, not that you can't jump into the market, just realize it's gonna be a little pain, a little bit of pain as it makes that transition. Also, obviously, inflation is not helping, but it's not the first
Right.
time it's happened in history in terms of like any inflation
No.
being this high.
No. Not at all. And that's just it is a necessary evil, like you said. Like we
Mm-hmm.
do need this to happen. It is going to help. I think it's just kind of hard to see all that through the fog and through the immediate shock of hey, rates just spiked up, right?
Mm-hmm.
I personally think if we had tapered off the buying of mortgage-backed securities over a longer period of time, a prolonged period, right, it would have been less of a shock to the market, less of a
Yeah.
shock to the consumer. But we didn't. And you and I don't get to make that choice. So whether we
Nope.
agree with it or not, we work in that market and we got to deal with it.
Well,
And,
that's
and the only thing we can do is just
well.
educate our
Well,
clients.
the feds don't do things like that. They go one way or the other. That's
Yeah,
just what they do. They go extreme left or extreme right, and they fluctuate. There is
right.
no like, all right, we're gonna transition. It's just like, hey, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like, we're just gonna do this. Put on the brakes.
Yep. I mean, it is what it is. The rest
Yeah,
of us
it
got to
is what it
figure it out.
is. You can't avoid it. But we'll transition to the last topic today, and that is San Diego is ranked as the least affordable city in the nation.
Ooh, least
Yeah.
affordable, huh?
Least affordable. It's such a, oh my god. I've had people like send me this article, and it's such a clickbait thing that I've seen
Yeah.
that so many news organizations pass around. And like, yes, the median income is sitting around 80,000, and home prices have definitely increased a lot because they're leaving LA, San Francisco. We all have seen people moving
Right.
here to San Diego because it is like one of the best cities, in my opinion, in California. So yes, it is more expensive here, and inflation hasn't helped. But people, I think, look at that and they just assume, oh, well, I can't afford $1 million home. It doesn't mean you have to spend
Right.
$1 million in the county. It's just I mean, but it is an expensive city. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, I think it is expensive. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, $1 million for a home in San Diego. I mean, depending where you're looking, sometimes doesn't get you much,
Yep.
right? Um, I think that there are very affordable areas within San Diego,
Mm-hmm.
but I also think it's an alignment of expectations, right?
Yeah.
What do you expect to get when you buy your first home or even your second home, right? And you see when you take a buyer into a home, they're like, how many times have you walked through a home and people are like, oh, I don't like these faucets or this paint color or this floor
All the time.
sucks or right.
Oh, looks like we lost Eric. So we will let that go. But going back into the topic, so yes, San Diego is an expensive city. Inflation has definitely continued to increase, and the market is still competitive. We were talking before the show that it's very interesting. So I think heading into May, you will see more homes hit the market. Even this last weekend, we've seen a lot of homes jump on. And looks like we got him back. I think you're muted. Nah, I can't hear you. You're muted. But, well, yeah, no, can't hear you. You're muted. So, but yeah, so getting into it, obviously, like we've started seeing some more homes, especially this last week, hit the market. And what's interesting about rates increasing is we may see, some changes in the market as things hit. But yeah, it's really crazy the amount of inflation we've seen. Eric, you're still muted, bud. So I can't. Yeah, I can't hear you. No, nothing. Oh, there you go. We got you.
You got me back?
Yep, got you back. But it's all good. So I think we can start wrapping up today's show. I think it was really informative. San Diego is expensive, but like you said, you can still find affordable areas to live inside the city. It's not like
Yeah.
not everyone's going to live in Carlsbad, Encinitas, Del Mar. I mean, come on, that's just. I mean, we all want to, but we all can't. Like it is expensive, but yeah, man. So thanks so much for coming on this week. Like I said, anyone, if you are looking to make the move here to San Diego, the number below is how you can get a hold of me, and it's me. I answer the phone, and I am the one who can help you make the decision when coming out here, as well as Eric will be here as well if you need it. But hey, thanks so much, and we will see you all next week.